Tyler Shough was Justin Herbert's backup at Oregon, and even though Justin Herbert is on his second contract in the NFL, Shough is just coming out as a rookie this season at the age of 25. An incredible injury history has prevented him from truly breaking out in college, but his 2024 was fantastic, and he has an incredible arm and some pro-ready traits. But will his age prevent him from being a developmental prospect at all in the NFL? Or will the fact that quarterbacks can play a lot later mean that a team might invest in this pro-ready talent? If you enjoy this video, please consider liking and subscribing as I take a look into maybe the oldest rookie I've ever scouted. The strengths of Shough in Louisville are really obvious to see. He has an absolutely huge arm and can work all three levels of the field, throwing with incredible velocity with very little backlift and a relatively quick release. He had 20 big-time throws in 2024, which was one of the highest marks in the nation, and it could potentially have led to even better stats if his wide receivers and his pass catchers hadn't had one of the highest drop rates at any college in the nation. Then he also has prototypical size, and I think this shows from his mechanics. He's able to play with a very sturdy base, enabling him to generate that velocity with his above average arm talent. The other thing is that he does have experience running play action under center, which is going to be a very valuable tool getting into the NFL and something that not all college quarterbacks get to do. Although, as I've mentioned already, with 7 years in college, you'd hope that he'd have experience with a lot of different systems, and he has played at 3 colleges, even though he's suffered major injuries at each one. I would say he's a naturally accurate thrower of the ball. This is something that surprised me a little bit, especially because of that drop rate. And while he had good stats in his final year, they weren't quite elite. And when you have a talent that is known for having a big arm, it tends to be that that's the trait they rely on and not the accuracy. But I do think he's naturally accurate. I think he has really good command of an offense and he's able to work the full field, which is a really exciting thing to see when you're able to translate that skill to the NFL. So this was a really strong thing to see from Shough. The other thing is that I do think he's a plus athlete. Now, it's more about strength and physicality than the ability to juke and use speed in open space. But I think in the designed run game, which they didn't use that often, he can be a plus athlete, which for a fancy football perspective could provide a relatively strong floor if he goes to an offense that looks to use him for this, especially on quarterback sneaks. The obvious weakness with Shough is age. He is 25 and will turn 26 going into his rookie season in the NFL. Now, this is a huge downside for him. And I did mention in the titles that obviously quarterbacks do play a little bit longer, so he could still have, a 10 to 15 year career in the NFL if things do work out. But the main issue here is that there's just not going to be the same ability to invest in a developmental player later down the board, which is likely where he's going to go. If you're investing in a quarterback who's 21, it's easy to say there's going to be another 5 years for them to develop. With Shough, you'd even potentially be looking to move on typically in 5 years, just after his rookie contract has ended. This age is going to be a huge issue for him. And even though he's a quarterback, it could knock him off some teams' boards entirely. The reason he is such an old prospect is also a huge thing coming into the NFL. He has had massive injuries in the past 3 seasons, aside from 2024. And this injury history could be a complete coincidence and something which is just an accident, but it could lead to potentially him being injury prone. This is something that NFL evaluators will have to figure out for themselves because it's not something we can judge without any medical insights, but it's definitely a huge concern. In terms of the actual issues that I had with his game, I think he has a tendency to fade away from passes relatively often. Now, this is fine if you have pressure coming into your face, so you have to kind of use slightly worse mechanics in order to try and get the pass off. But I think he does this before he actually has pressure in his face. This is another thing, is that I think he struggles under pressure. I don't think he really knows how to stay tall in a collapsing pocket, and I think he has a tendency to then try to escape or just accept his fate with the incoming sack. The other thing is his gunslinger ability could lead to issues in the NFL. I think he knows that he has a huge arm. I think he knows he can make any throw on the field. But when he gets to the NFL, there's definitely some passes that would be picked off when watching his college film. I think this is a huge strength of his game that he is willing to go out there and try and make every throw. But when it gets to the NFL, he might not be able to in the same way, just because every athlete is just as good as him, and the corners are way better at reading those throws that he may be targeting a fair while in advance. So that gunslinger mentality could be both a massive strength and a huge weakness when he gets to the league. The obvious comparison here is Jameis Winston. I was considering Matthew Stafford in terms of that big arm, but I don't think he quite has the accuracy and toughness of Stafford, who obviously went first overall. And while Jameis Winston did as well, it's definitely worth mentioning that Jameis Winston is the ultimate gunslinger. There's also the potential here for someone like Ryan Fitzpatrick, but it's just someone that I think has an elite arm, but sometimes might struggle with the processing when they actually get to the NFL. The projected draft value here is the most interesting thing. The reason I wanted to make this video on Shough and do some scouting into him, because he wasn't a prospect on my initial 50 prospects list, is that I've seen some people talking about the Rams taking him at 26 overall, which to me felt a little bit insane for someone whose consensus is towards the top of the 4th round. Now, obviously, with quarterbacks, a team can fall in love with them. They can end up going way higher than we think. We've seen it all the time. But to me, Shough is a developmental prospect with the arm and traits that could mean he could succeed and be a priority backup with eventual starting capacity, but I just can't see him going all that way in the first round. That feels genuinely absurd to me watching his game. Then, in terms of his rookie draft value, if he is drafted relatively high in Superflex leagues, you can take him around the 3rd round, maybe even the back of the 2nd if it looks like he's going to start somewhere. In one quarterback leagues, this isn't someone I'd be drafting at all. The value is just not going to be there because of the lack of elite athleticism and the fact he's not going to be starting right away in the NFL. Is it even possible to be a 25-year-old rookie and succeed in the league? Let me know down below in the comments. Would you draft Shough? Do you love him? Do you hate him? Had you heard of him before watching this video? Please consider liking and subscribing to see everything else on my channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.